I know.
That one was too loud. Like I used that.
I know.
That was like purifying. Is it kind of louder?
Yeah, or if you turn it even more away from the mic.
It's all good.
As long as you're comfortable, and don't sweat to the oldies during this whole interview, it'll be good as much as possible. All right. We ready, my peoples?
Hunter, is that all right? Am I getting a bunch of this?
No, you should be good. Let me listen back real quick.
I'm trying to think like where does it go to stay out of the wind? Oh, and this is on high too, isn't it? Is there a way to?
That's what it seems so loud today.
Yeah, actually that one. There you go. Just put it down to one.
Yeah,
there, there we go.
That's
now we're
better.
in business.
All right. Now it's not like HVAC.
We're in the wind tunnel.
All right, y'all.
So we are live. It's just like the podcast is another thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're just doing a little pre-interview
I know.
now.
Hey, look, I love it. Love it.
I like how it starts like the pre
Free convo.
the combo, and then
The pre-Arlene was awesome.
yo.
The post Arlene was awesome.
Yeah. The everything has been awesome.
You guys ready?
Yep.
All right.
Rise and shine. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and tune in to Good Morning Aurora. News, weather, and really cool interviews. Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m.
Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. The time is now 8:03 a.m. and you are listening to Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. So we are joined in the studio today by a friend of the show, a city fan and favorite, Mr. Rick Guzman of the Neighbor Project. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's
Good
great
to
to be
see
with
you.
you again, Curtis
Good to
and
see you.
Christine and team.
Yep.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk about what's going on.
All right. Here with my co-host and friend, Christine.
Good morning.
Hunter behind the mic.
Yo.
And JV behind the camera, making it all come together. Teamwork makes the dream work. So we have a lot to talk to you guys about today. We're going to make it quick because Mr. Guzman has some great updates for us about initiatives that are very important, in addition to voting, taking place in the community. So firstly, on a somber note, the COVID-19 totals. So CDC.gov, as we've been telling you guys since the beginning of this show, since way back, CDC.gov/coronavirus has updated COVID-19 data. As of this moment, cases in the U.S. are 5,382,125. Total deaths are 169,350. That's an increase of 41,893 new cases and 654 new deaths compared to yesterday's data. Cases among healthcare personnel are 136,290, and deaths among healthcare personnel are 632. That comes as well amid an increase of COVID-19 data in the Kane and Will counties, and that's brought to us by the Illinois Department of Public Health. The target case rate over a 7-day rolling basis is 50 new cases per 100,000. Kane County is recording about 105 new COVID-19 cases per 100,000 people. Will County is recording about 93 new COVID-19 cases per 100,000 people. So please stay safe, wear masks in public, wash your hands, stop attending and or hosting large gatherings. In businesses, strictly enforce the wearing of masks in your establishment. Kane County Health Department is there at 630-208-3801. All right. The weather is partly cloudy. Currently 66 degrees, a high of 76 today. It'll also be still partly cloudy. Cloudy days are kind of nice. Tomorrow will be 77 degrees. And we also want to bring you up to speed on what our friends with Allen Force are doing. The 4th annual All In for Veterans charity ride, August 21st through September 20th, help support veterans. Now, this is going to be a socially distanced event, still fun on motorcycles. Not going to be a large gathering. They're going to do it land nav style. Help support veterans today, and that's at Allen Force, www.allenforce.org/AIFV. The Kane County Sheriff's Office Zoom meeting. Been telling you guys about this since last week. Thursday, August 20th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., the Economic Empowerment Webinar. Learn from experts about a free program that will help you reduce debt, improve credit score, find safe and affordable banking. That's brought to us by the Aurora Financial Empowerment Group, the City of Aurora, and our friends at the Neighbor Project, which is an excellent segue. An excellent segue to begin with our interview with Mr. Guzman and my co-host Christine.
Well, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, we're excited to be a part of this, and really, I have to credit Sheriff Ron Hain for the idea. I've actually done some work in the correction system, trying to help people reenter and stay out and get acclimated, and it's tough. One of the things I appreciate about the sheriff is he says, there's really 3 reasons why people come end up with him over at the jail, and the top 2 really are, financial instability or lack of opportunity, poverty, just that there are people who really don't have a lot of opportunity or choices, mental health being another big one. And so he's sort of really committed himself to say, how do we address those issues while people are imprisoned in the jail with him, but then follow them out on the outside and give them access to tools and resources that can be helpful. And so we just happened to have this before we ever started. Sheriff was knocking on my door saying, okay, when can we start? And finally this May we were able to launch the Financial Empowerment Center in partnership with the City of Aurora. And that gave us this opportunity to start this conversation with the sheriff and Judy Dawson, who's awesome over at in his office.
Shout out to Judy Dawson.
Absolutely. Wonderful. A lot of great people. And it takes, obviously good people who are dedicated, who get it. Right. And Judy gets it. Sheriff Ron Hain gets it. And they have said, well, okay, let's target 2 populations. One are the folks who are kind of the idle population that are there, but they've been also trying to reduce those numbers, thankfully, because they've had some COVID-19 in the prison. So they've been taking folks who are nonviolent offenders and just kind of putting them on ankle bracelets and getting them out so that they can be safer. And then so that's the second group, the people who are out in the community, who have barriers to employment, who have a lot of difficulties in trying to be able to don't have essentially the same opportunities as everyone because people look at them different or whatever the case may be, to target them. And that's what these empowerment webinars are about. Like, how do we get you into this free service that's actually, it's funded by a grant, a private foundation, and through the City of Aurora and a lot of banks. There's a whole bunch of stakeholders who all say, hey, if our fellow neighbors, our community members are financially stable, if they can have access to building their credit, if they can be able to save a little bit, and if they can have a rainy day fund, then that's going to create stability and strength for all of us. All of us win when that's the case.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're fortunate to have some leaders like Judy and Ron that really get that and wanted to make sure that the folks that they're working with have an opportunity to access these free services so that they can start to be able to be in positions of making their own contributions to community strength.
Tell us more about Rick Guzman. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Sure. Well, so I say that this is one of these topics where I get asked this question a lot, and I say, well, I grew up in Aurora and next door, one of our neighboring cities, because I went to church in Aurora. The school district that I was a part of, District 203, was not one that had the same kind of diversity, and great school system for sure. But there was always part of me that felt a little bit more at home with my youth group, which was very diverse. My church, which was up on Lincoln, just right here in downtown Aurora, Lincoln and Clark, that actually started a bilingual service. And so when I was about 15, I started leading worship at that service in English and Spanish. I got to learn a decent amount of Spanish, and later in college I've been tested as functionally fluent. So I'm not really, it's like one of those things where it's not quite fluent, but it's, passes. And so, but I learned a lot of my Spanish just from, people in the community, going to church and leading a church service that had both English. It was literally translated as we went. And so we'd sing songs in both. And, but anyway, after college, I never looked anywhere except Aurora. And so almost 20 years ago now, I moved to the city of Aurora just knowing this was where we wanted to be. And we specifically targeted the west side of Aurora because at the time, their demographics were like almost a third. Like they're a little different now, but you know, maybe 30 to 40% white, 30 to 40% Hispanic, 25% African American. This was like, that's exactly what we wanted. And as good as money can make a school, there's no amount of money that can actually buy that kind of real world exposure and connection to people who are different in some ways, but you know, differences are the best way to show us how much the same we really all are. And so that's where we wanted our kids to be, and that's where they are in the West Aurora School District.
Experience all that.
129. Shout out.
That's right. I see your EA shirt on over there, but it's the city of Aurora. It's just one of its greatest strengths.
Right.
Is its diversity, and it's not just ethnic, but it's cultural, artistic. It's just like there's just a little bit of everything.
The architecture, the neighborhoods, all of it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's where, and then, you know, I think that I went to law school later on. I worked for the governor of Illinois. I worked in the Department of Corrections in the reentry. I actually headed up their Office of Reentry Management, it was called, and then I went to law school. And coming out of law school, I had an opportunity to maybe, you know, kind of go back into government, but I actually took a brief stint into nonprofit work, and I really liked that. I was working in Aurora on some educational initiatives, and just as I was getting started there, Mayor Tom Weisner, the late Mayor Tom Weisner, who's really my greatest mentor, he came knocking on my door again and said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody who, you know, maybe can help with some housing initiatives." And my wife and I had started a nonprofit that was helping mostly refugees and immigrants be able to become homeowners. And we were kind of trying to think of innovative ways of leveraging existing resources, bundling them, partnering. And so I guess this building of the collaboration got the attention of the Dunham Fund, which is just getting off the ground. The Dunham Fund talked to the mayor, and they said, "Hey, this is a guy, I guess this is the story anyway, that could help." And at the time, there was a problem with some of our there was a disagreement, I should say, between the Aurora Housing Authority and the mayor's office and a lot of the city council. And so they put together a blue ribbon task force on affordable housing, and the mayor asked me to lead it. And so I joined the city government, and we worked on a number of housing initiatives. And during that same time, I started looking at the possibility of merging this organization my wife and I had started called Emmanuel House with really our closest partner, which was called Joseph Corporation, which is a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. So you get a lot of resources from the federal government, and did all of our housing and home ownership education courses, financial literacy, and we partnered together really well. And over time, we just realized, hey, wouldn't it be a lot easier if we were just under one roof? And not to make it sound too simple, because it was about an 18-month process, but we eventually merged those organizations then to become the Neighbor Project. So sometimes when you ask me who's Rick Guzman, I start talking about like what we do.
That is
and what
who you
it's
are.
come.
That is who you are. That's all part of it.
It's a blessing to have a vocation where it feels like, you know, actually an embodiment of what you believe in, and to be able to work on what you're passionate about.
What impact has your mom had on your life?
So I'm gonna try to not get too deep into it here, because my mom's going through cancer treatment right now. So, you know, this whole history, I guess, this connection to Aurora wouldn't have happened if my mom wasn't a pastor's kid who looked for a church that was connected to her family's background. My grandfather was a Free Methodist pastor. Turns out the longest standing Free Methodist church that's still in the same location as when it was founded is in Aurora, Illinois, on Lincoln and Clark. And so it was the closest one. She brought us here. She's got a driving faith that kind of, you know, kept us connected to the church. And one of the things I really appreciate about my mom is that despite this religious background, and it was pretty strict growing up, is she always made it clear to me that it was okay to question certain things, that just because a doctrine or a dogma might say one thing doesn't mean that that's actually at the core of truth, love, justice, which to me is still obviously the essence of God. And so it just because it's always been believed a certain way doesn't mean that that's necessarily the way that God intends it to be. And so from a relatively young age, I started questioning some of these beliefs, thanks to my mom and my dad as well, both of whom were very critical thinkers and ingrained in me this idea that, like, it doesn't matter where the truth leads as long as you're pursuing, even if it leads in something that is in opposition to what you grew up believing.
Right.
So at a pretty young age, I started realizing, hey, wait a minute, like, why is the church in opposition to gay rights? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And so I studied that in college. I did a whole research paper, and it was the kind of thing that I might not, be where I feel like I should be, where truth is, if it hadn't been for my mom, for my dad, for my parents ingraining in me this critical thinking and this sort of drive that no matter where it leads, it's more important to pursue where truth is, where justice is, than it is to sort of, stay anchored to a tradition. Traditions are important; they have their place, but I think that's something they ingrained in me. And then my dad, transitioning to him, took me to Hesed House when they first opened. So this is 37 years ago, 36, something like that, as how old they are. So I was 6 or 7 years old the first time I went there, and we went every month. And that had a big impression on me too, because when you meet people, when you're there, you realize everybody has something to contribute. Everybody has something to offer. And I think from a young age, I realized the people that we're maybe serving food to, like, their circumstances are different than ours, but they're no different than us. And that had a big impact on me too.
Everybody matters.
The time is now 8:18 a.m. You're listening to Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. We're glad to be joined with Rick Guzman of the Neighbor Project. Everywhere I've seen you, you've been boots on the ground helping people. Like, I've actually seen you helping people in addition to making administrative and executive decisions with your positions. You have always blended that, and it's a very reassuring thing to a person to see someone who's also got sweat equity in what they do. We titled this episode "Be the Neighbor." What is, and that's an ode to that piece of artwork and that particular gala day. What is a neighbor to you?
Yeah, I love that question, and it's sort of, obviously there are multiple answers, and in some respects, obviously the first thing that comes to mind when people think of neighbor is proximity, like your next door neighbor, your neighborhood, the people around you, and that's an important idea, an important concept to grab onto, because where you live is the neighborhood because of the neighbors who make it up. Like, it's defined by, and so you're connected to those people. And that's true on a larger level too, but the part of the word neighbor that is why we have it as a neighbor project is not only because of us wanting to reach out to those proximate to us, to the people around us, and to sort of create an organization that creates tools to be used by our neighbors to make their own contributions to the strengthening of our neighborhoods. But the word neighbor has a deeper meaning, and it's not always the one that people immediately go to. And so there's the story, people think of a good neighbor, the Good Samaritan, is a parable that's in the Bible that Curtis knows we talked about directly in the sort of commissioning of a piece of artwork that we have in our classroom that says, "Be the neighbor," because that parable is a parable about that is told about a man who's beaten and robbed and left for dead on the side of the road, and a pastor and a Levite and people in the church pass by, and then a Samaritan who is, in the sort of tradition, is a little bit of there's sort of these warring factions, so to speak. The Jews and the Samaritans didn't particularly get along, and so so this Samaritan comes by and helps this person who's been beaten and robbed, help them to get back on their feet. And at the end of the parable, Jesus asks, now, the obvious, somewhat rhetorical question, which of these was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the obvious answer is the one who stopped, the one who helped this person get back on their feet, the one who positioned that person to be able to go on and make their own contributions to their community, that they wouldn't have been able to do without that. And so when we talk about the Neighbor Project, it is also not just a call of who we want to maybe equip or enlist or empower in our communities, but it's also who we want to be. We want to be the neighbor in that story, the ones who care enough to stop and help people who maybe have fallen on hard times. But it's not just about, like, here's the other dimension of it I didn't mention that night that I love. There's a Martin Luther King quote where he says, you know, that it's that on the one hand we are called to be the Good Samaritan, but at some point we also have to realize that it's not enough to just sort of help the person in a single action. He says we have to come to realize that the whole of Jericho Road needs to be transformed so that people don't keep falling into the hands, men and women don't fall into the hands of robbers on the journey on life's highway. It's a beautiful quote that calls us to action, not just to help in a single action, but to sort of look systemically. What can we do to make sure that people don't get into those situations in the first place? That's some of what, I mean, it's reactionary. That's some of what we're kind of trying to prevent, you know, when we think about or break cycles, that when people keep falling into being victims to certain things. So with the sheriff, we're trying to do that. With the Financial Empowerment Center, we're trying to do that. We're trying to scale up so that we can be helping enough of our neighbors, equipping enough of our neighbors so that they start being the force that makes the difference. As more and more people have the financial stability to invest in their neighborhoods, to become homeowners, to build community wealth, that then starts to impact everything, because, you know, our schools are funded by the tax base, and the tax base is held lower when there's instability, because instability doesn't kind of call for investment. So as home ownership goes up, so does investment, so does community wealth, so do businesses choose to locate in the community more.
Disposable income, people got more of that.
Absolutely, exactly. And so stores benefit. That's one of the things that we always say. Like, you know, there are people who are paying money into debt, rather into, you know, what could be supporting local stores or businesses. You know, they could be renovating their homes. They could be investing in things that lift up an entire community. And we inherently believe that all people have that ability within them, and that in many cases people just need the tools, the resources to be able to grab onto, or to be able to realize those abilities and start impacting and building and strengthening their community to the benefit of us all.
Right.
And so it's sort of this, like, Bono, I think, called it like enlightened self-interest. That's what it was. So it's this idea like, okay, wait a minute. If my neighbor is doing well and my neighbors are doing well, doesn't that make my neighborhood more stable and better for me?
And I live here. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's sort of, so it's like, if you think about it, when other people, one of the things we say too is that when our neighbors prosper, we do too. Or when our neighbors prosper, our city thrives. It's really about this sort of grassroots effort to try to strengthen individuals so that they go on to strengthen the community.
Catch a fish for a man, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly. Yep. And sometimes people will take that another step, which is that if you can help somebody own a piece of that pond, start a small business, to do something, to be a stockholder, to be an investor, now there's more, that impact can be magnified even more. And that's kind of that's what we're trying to do too. We're absolutely doing those educational things, teaching a man to fish. But we're also trying to get people into ownership, into asset building, into things, because when people have those resources, more disposable income, wealth that they have, that makes them that puts them in a position to be able to invest in the very neighborhoods that we all live in, and the housing stock, the school, the tax base that funds our schools, all these things ultimately cannot be sort of lifted up on their own.
Right.
They really need kind of a rising tide of people who are empowered to be able to make contributions towards that kind of stability.
You have a bunch of different programs going on now. So you talked a couple about the financial empowerment. What's coming up where people can learn some of these ways?
Yeah, so there are kind of our core services, educational services. One of the things that kind of really probably meets the most people where they're at is this financial empowerment center, which anybody can take advantage of. And so it's not just for some of the groups that we're targeting, like in partnership with the sheriff. Anybody who's interested in, and the kind of the 4 things that we target there are safe banking. So there's something like 30% of Aurora that is either unbanked or underbanked, not getting access to all banking services, which creates financial instability. So helping people get connected to full banking services and use those services, credit building, so that's helping. There's a huge number of people that don't have any credit established at all, so helping people establish that or build it. So we're helping people increase their credit through a variety of programs, educational, but also kind of, this is the Financial Empowerment Center is this asset-based coaching model that kind of really looks at people's strengths and figures out, okay, how can we build on that?
Right.
And then they also look at reducing debt and savings. So, another statistic we're trying to fight against is this national statistic that 40% of households don't have $400 of savings that they can call on even in an emergency.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so we're trying to help, we're working with people first to just sort of work towards savings. And we have a goal of 1 week of salary that is saved, that is your rainy day fund. And then we work on a month. And then we start to look at bigger things like maybe home ownership or something else that creates an asset that is for you, that can be leveraged to borrow, to send kids to school, that can be passed on, that creates a safety net. And so I'll use that as the segue into some of these other programs. We're seeing, I think, time and time again, and maybe we'll get time to talk about more of this later, but that there are more resources, programs, opportunities, and kind of safety nets for people who are homeowners who have some sort of an asset to fall back on than there are for renters. And an example of that is, I think, a little bit in a couple of the programs that we've gotten a grant from the Illinois Housing Development Authority to be able to promote and assist with online applications for 2 big programs. The state of Illinois has put $300 million into an emergency rent assistance and an emergency mortgage assistance program. And so, and I look at these 2 things and I say, okay, well, these 2 programs are a good example of how, in some ways, how there are more supports for homeowners, and how if you can get somebody into that situation, they might be better off, because there's the home ownership, the emergency mortgage assistance program that is going to start. It's not available now, but it'll be available on Monday for people to apply online. And it is, let's see here. So you can apply online at, so I just make sure I've got, it's ema.ihda.org.
Y'all get a pen and write that down at home. Get that information.
So ema.ihda.org. That's Emergency Mortgage Assistance Program, Emergency Mortgage Assistance, Illinois Housing Development Authority.org. So ema.ihda.org. And for homeowners, there is $15,000 of assistance. It's the most generous program of its kind in the nation right now, as a response to the economic shutdowns and that homeowners who've been impacted. So if you are at least a month behind, so you have to be current as of February 29th. This was a leap year, so as of February 29th, you had to have been current on your mortgage. But if you've fallen behind since March 1st, and you're at least a month behind, this program, you can access $15,000. It is not a loan. It doesn't need to be repaid. That can also, if somebody, there's a lot of people who took advantage of those forbearances, or the deferrals of their mortgage payments for 3 or 6 months. it can pay that off for you as well. So, you know, there were a lot of things that were made available to mortgage holders, to homeowners, like, hey, if you're in trouble right now, just just click a couple buttons and you don't have to pay your mortgage for 3 months. If you need to extend that, you can extend that to 6 months. And so people got this immediate relief. And then for most people, they've been able to move those payments to the end of their mortgage. Well, for renters, they don't have that opportunity. They don't have. There was an eviction moratorium, but there was nothing saying that once that moratorium expires, which, by the way, it does this weekend. Actually, it was extended. Yeah, okay. August 22nd.
Oh, wow.
It was extended one last time. It was supposed to expire July 27th, but it was extended to the 22nd of August. You still owe that money, and you can be evicted if you don't.
Right.
And so that leads me to the other program, the Emergency Rent Assistance Program, which is the same website except it's era.ihda.org. So era.ihda.org. That program provides $5,000 of emergency rental assistance. Still the largest $150 million and most generous $5,000 per household program of its kind in the nation is what we're told and so that program is available right now. So that program rolled out first last Monday. You can apply right now. Last night I got an email saying they're extending the deadline to next Friday, so the 28th.
Awesome.
And the way that program works is similar. You have to have been current on your rent prior to the pandemic, so prior to March 1st. So so February 1st, you have to have been current on your rent, and then fallen behind after March 1st. And you do have to certify. You have to basically swear under potential penalty of perjury that you have had some sort of economic loss of income due to your business shutting down, layoffs. It could be anything, but sort of connected to this pandemic. And if that's the case, if you've lost income and you are behind on your rent, you can get $5,000 of assistance that will not only pay your back rent, but if you owe $2,000 for an example, it'll pay your back rent and it'll give you a $3,000 credit towards your future rent as well. So it gives you some breathing room to be able to hopefully find a job and get back into a situation where you can pay. And the mortgage program does the same thing. It'll cover your past due as well as your future, and it will go all the way through the end of the year. So the funds have to be spent by December 31st, but it will pay both past due rent or past due mortgage payments as well as future rent or mortgage payments all the way through the end of the year.
I think the ILDCEO had another, maybe that's one that just expired. They had one where it was they were paying the landlord, in the case of the renter, they're paying landlords directly or something like that. I believe that there was that in conjunction with another city initiative. Was it the Restore?
So
Is that what I'm thinking about?
So yes, there was a program that was specifically for businesses because DCEO is a program that works with businesses, and the city had a program. You're right, exactly. I believe that program has ended at this point.
Okay.
That might be something that someone needs to fact check me on. That was an early response that the city put out some of its own money and partnered with DCEO on to be able to send some lifelines out to businesses who'd had to shut down, on top of the the Paycheck Protection Program that was also out there. Because at first people weren't able to access that, and there were people who really needed lifelines early on. And so that was a program that was targeted specifically at small businesses. But then I should mention that this emergency rent assistance program that we're helping people, we're not only promoting it, but we're also we've got people on call all the time. We've got this phone tree and this call center. We've been helping literally hundreds. So we've had 1 week and 1 day of promoting this program, and hundreds of calls have come in, and we've helped a very large number of those people, over 100, actually do the application themselves. Some people, it's just kind of like answering questions or pointing them in the direction of resources they need. But we've helped people in that time period. And the state of Illinois, partly because this is such a generous program, they're expecting anywhere from 150 to 200,000 applications. Well, they have 150 million at $5,000 a pop only funds 30,000 households. That's a huge number of households, 30,000 households. But if 30,000 out of 150,000 get funded, then 80% of people aren't going to get funded, aren't going to get the assistance they need. And so one of the things I've been giving the city of Aurora a lot of props for is they saw that. They understood that as generous and big as this $150 million program was, it wasn't going to help everybody. And so they came up with their own program that I think actually just yesterday they launched. So it overlaps a little bit, but it also has a further out deadline, August 31st, for people to apply. And that program it only pays your back rent, but up to 2 months of past due rent can be paid through that program too. So a pretty generous program, particularly when you consider the difference in resources that the state of Illinois has versus the city. And the city is, again, I think, gone out of its way to be one of the few places, other than Cook County and Chicago, I'm not aware of other places that have put such a big investment. I mean, something like $500,000 that they've put in to say, hey, we want our folks to be taken care of. And if you can't access the state program, if you live in Aurora, you're lucky because you'll get a second bite at the apple. There's another chance. So there's another program that is available through the city. And I'm trying to see if I have their website on here on where people can access it. But it's the City of Aurora Rental Assistance Program that is available. And so I think I don't have the exact website of where people should go. But if you I'll give the phone number, though. If you just call the city's 256-INFO. Okay. I mean, so it's just easy. 256-INFO. They're getting lots of calls about this already, I know.
256-INFO, 256-INFO, 256-INFO. Get it.
That's the easy way to remember how to access the City of Aurora's rental assistance application, which just went live yesterday. Nice. And so it's great to be able to promote these at the same time because we know a majority of the people we're helping, even though they all need it, aren't going to get access to it. So if you live just outside of Aurora, make sure you get this because this is your one shot. Call the Neighbor Project. That's 630-906-9400. Or just go to our website, neighborproject.us. All right. And you can link to a how to apply document right there. You have to apply online. And and I'm going back to the state program, you have to apply online, but people are having some issues with it, and that's what we're here for. So if you have any issues at all, you can call us. But most people have been able to do it on their own, and so we encourage people, try to do it on your own. You basically just have to certify a bunch of things, basically sign, this is my situation. You have to upload an ID. Yeah. And verify your income, but really it's mostly that self-certification. Then it gets sent to your landlord. Your landlord has to then upload a copy of your lease and some sort of documentation, a 5-day notice, a rent ledger that shows that you're behind, and proof of ownership. So it's relatively streamlined and simple for the landlord too. And once the tenant and the landlord finish, then their application is finished, and they go into this randomized process to be selected. So I really encourage anybody to go after this because this is like I said, the most generous program of its kind. But if you don't live in Aurora, this is your one shot. If you do live in Aurora, there are actually going to be two opportunities for you.
256-INFO. Remember to call that, guys. 256-INFO.
This is great because there's so much information out there and so many opportunities. But just to reiterate, if they need help, if people need help in English and Spanish,
yes,
you will assist them. Am I eligible? What are my next steps? How do I go about this?
Absolutely. And I should say that, this is another reason why I brought these little sheets here these cheat sheets to say that while we offer English and Spanish assistance, because our staff is about half bilingual, they're through the state of Illinois. And again, we can connect you to that. Neighborproject.us, we can connect you. They're offering services available: English, Spanish, Polish, Italian, French, Romanian, Albanian, Serbian, Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, Cantonese, Tagalog, Mandarin, and ASL. So they're
America.
They're providing a lot of languages for people to be able to access, knowing that there are people that this is a diverse state,
Right.
just like a diverse city that we're in, and so those resources are available to people.
The time is now 8:41 a.m. You are listening to Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast, and we're glad to be joined by Rick Guzman of the Neighbor Project. Your time in Aurora, how has Aurora changed from when you came back and started doing your thing and breaking ground with Lazarus House? Or excuse me, Emmanuel House.
Yep. We do partner with Lazarus House, by the way.
So I wasn't wrong.
No, and Hesed House. So those are two of our partners.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The neighbor, see that?
That's it. They're great organizations. Yeah. Lazarus House is up in the Fox Valley, northern Fox Valley area, kind of Geneva, St. Charles. Mm-hmm. We partner with them and Hesed House, but it was Emmanuel House. So back to your question.
All right.
Sorry.
How has Aurora changed from then till now? What's some of the biggest changes that you've noticed?
So, to me, in some ways, the change is almost more external. Like, people are realizing Aurora is as amazing as I saw it when it was the only place in the world that I considered moving and starting a family, right? So when I looked at Aurora, and I, kind of like I always say, part of my childhood, part of my upbringing was in Aurora through my youth group. A lot of my friends were here. And so when I looked at Aurora and said, that's the only place for me, like, it was because of all of the amazing things that people are, kind of starting to realize, and really for a little bit of time now. So in 2002, when I moved here, it wasn't necessarily known for. The first thing that came to mind wasn't necessarily First Fridays,
right?
Because
the Paramount,
the Paramount, right? Because the Paramount wasn't what it was. Marissa hadn't started First Fridays yet. There were a number of people who really helped to bring out and showcase all of these strengths that were there, but just like the Neighbor Project, it sort of is this idea of like, well, how do we untap these amazing resources? How do we unleash this potential that is there for Aurora to be a city that just, doesn't really have, a peer or a neighbor kind of city that really has everything that Aurora has to offer. And that's what drew me here. Of course, crime was significantly higher at the time. There were some issues that Aurora hadn't fully gotten their hands around. And so, if you look at 2002 to 2020, there are all sorts. I mean, crime is way down. There are, there's 500,000 people coming to downtown. Unfortunately, not this year,
right,
for art, for the Paramount or River Edge or these kinds of things.
But
like
previous to COVID, yes.
Yeah, these things weren't happening back then, but that sort of like that multicultural richness was there. The architectural historical significance was there. The diversity clearly was there and was a big part of what drew us here. All these things were there. There were these just amazing untapped resources that weren't, there at the same level, at least in any other community around. And so I think what has changed really, like I said, is more from the external viewpoint. People now realize that Aurora, sure, we still have some work to do on crime. We still have some work to do on, certainly everybody does on job creation, economic development
right
now. But I think our leadership's doing a really good job of being able to continue to mine all of these sort of untapped resources that are there. And it's an ongoing process. And we're thrilled to be working with the city right now as such a close partner to be able to just continue, what started. I mean, I think I go back to Tom Weisner, who really, when he came in, you really started seeing, and it started a little before him. He built on efforts before him.
Who was the mayor before Mr. Weisner?
Stover was the mayor. He was the former police chief, and so some of those improvements in crime started under Mayor Stover, and they continued. And really, I think we started seeing recognition because of just the drastic. About 2007 is where Chief Thomas, my friend who I serve on the Wabansie Community College Board of Trustees with, he always pointed to 2007 as like, if you look at 5 years going from 2007 backwards to 2002 versus 2007 forward to 2012, the year when we had no murders, it was really this almost like night and day comparison of just where the progress was really starting to take hold. And so that now continued by Mayor Irvin, who's also, like I said, continuing to mine these untapped resources and do a great job of really highlighting Aurora for what it is. Because Aurora, like I said, has always been a strong, diverse, rich community. It always has. And I think just more and more people are starting to realize that, thanks to Mayor Irvin, Mayor Wisner, Mayor Stover, all the people that have done that, great city council members. And again, not to say that any of these people are without faults. That people, it's a process. It's an effort. But we've been blessed to have some good leadership in this community who believe in this community and who see, I think similar to I do, see that Aurora sometimes doesn't, and certainly before, wasn't being seen for how great of a community it was.
No, it was not. When I worked downtown Chicago, I'd take the train every morning. I would get that from people going downtown and coming back. Where do you live, Curtis? Aurora. Kind of. And it's like, no, it's actually pretty nice, but I can't, defeat the impression that they had in their head of it.
Yeah, and, it's like one of those things where one of the truisms that you hear in sometimes in the media is it takes 10 good stories to overcome every bad story. And of course, for decades, that was the storyline of Aurora. And so it's taken some real concerted effort by some, I think, really dedicated, passionate leaders to be able to help. And and it's not just the mayors. I mean, thank goodness for Arlene Hawks, who you had on here, she didn't need to take over SciTech and rescue that sort of, and to continue to invest in that. And of course, over all these years, just investing in countless lives through the arts and theater program at East Aurora. But Marissa Amoni, who's really kind of helped to spark this movement, this artistic movement in downtown, and just bringing, 10 years ago, you never would have thought that you could come down and see thousands of people out on the street on a Friday night, right? I mean,
cocoa crawls and all. Yeah.
All right, exactly. Yep. And so people, it's people from all over that it takes. But the one common thread that connects Marissa, Arlene, Tom Weiser, Mayor Irvin, I like to maybe be included in that group.
I was thinking about that was your tenure. You were.
No,
there.
and I don't mean to be not fishing here or anything, but the common thread the reason I identify with those people, the reason I mention those people is because they all saw the potential and the richness and the greatness of Aurora before other people saw it. And they invested in it, and they invested in others in ways to sort of bring out their abilities to shine. And so First Fridays, Marissa would be the first one to tell you, First Fridays wouldn't be what it was if we didn't have these amazing small businesses, if we didn't have these diverse group of artists and people that were creating right in our midst. And people wouldn't be aware of it, though, if people hadn't come together in a way. So it's always a collaborative effort. And so it takes people who believe in that, who can see it, even when others don't, but then also invest in something that is other than themselves.
Right.
To be able to empower and equip other people to be able to shine, to be able to contribute, to be able to strengthen and revitalize. And that's what I keep seeing over and over. And so the change, like I said, isn't necessarily in the fabric of Aurora. It's in, thanks to some people that have really helped highlight all of this stuff, it's in the perception of Aurora. And of course, that has an impact too. As perception changes, more people think, oh yeah, maybe I'm going to look at downtown Aurora to start a business or move to Aurora, take advantage of one of these great programs. Another one we partner with is there's a Choose Aurora program, down payment assistance, $3,000 that you can get on top of all these other down payment assistance just for buying an Aurora that you can access. And so a lot of these programs, I should mention, are also income qualified. So you have to be under a certain area median income to qualify for them. But some of them, so like the mortgage assistance program, you can be above the area median income, 120% of that. Others of them are oftentimes like at an 80% of area median income. But these programs are available for people And I think more and more people are starting to look at Aurora as, oh, well, that's a unique, cool, rich, vibrant community that has a lot more to offer than some of the other cities around. We won't do too many comparisons. Call out.
No. Right. We won't name names. I mean, shout out Oswego. Shout out Oswego. But the time is now 8:51 a.m. You're listening to Good Morning Aurora, and we are sitting down with Mr. Rick Guzman of the Neighbor Project. Okay. So I did want to plant a flag here, real quick in the conversation. So COVID-19 has come and has drastically changed how we do many things, up to and including volunteering. Some of the strong initiatives that you guys always had. I feel like you guys had a consistent. Prior to COVID, you had a consistent calendar of events. Besides those two or those two initiatives, rather, what does the Neighbor Project have coming soon? And is there any plans to perhaps ease into some of the more tangible, physical, on-site initiatives, perhaps socially distanced?
Yeah, so we're still doing a lot of what. So we've moved all of our counseling and coaching services online. They are virtual, but we're still doing that. And in fact, our numbers in 2020 are, I'm not sure if they're necessarily up year to year, but we're on target to meet or probably exceed. Actually, I know we're going to, because we have some new programs, so we're going to significantly exceed the number of people. So our core programs should meet or exceed what we met last year. But with our new programs, so since our merger in 2018, we've doubled our staff, and this year, for the first time, with that increased staff, we're on pace to more than double the number of households that we are working with and helping to access some sort of resource or some sort of tool for them to make their own advancements. So by the end of 2020, we will have been able to look back and say, wow, we've doubled the number of households that we're assisting, that we're working with, that we're equipping. So we're continuing to do home ownership education classes for people. We're anticipating, not necessarily immediately, but at some point, potentially as early as this fall, a potential spike in foreclosures. So we continue to partner with the Kane County foreclosure mediation program, and if people are at risk of foreclosure or have had a filing against them, we can help with people in that situation. The county court system requires people to go through our foreclosure programming to be able to do that. So all those things are still happening. We continue to do a lot of our services are for families that also have maybe purchased a home, and we're continuing to equip.
Right.
So we have one this Saturday that, for example, is for existing homeowners that are learning DIY skills or just all sorts of different things that we try to help people, continue to be successful homeowners. And so those kinds of things continue, but maybe the easiest and best thing for people to sort of tap into and see what's going on and kind of get this breadth of what the Neighbor Project has become, because while for a long time home ownership was what we really focused on primarily, now it is, I think, financial empowerment and strengthening as much as anything else. We have a September 19th, we're doing a virtual gala. But the difference about virtual things is that because we're not providing the tuxedo event that you came to and volunteered at last year, Curtis, because we don't have that sit down sort of situation, it's free to anybody. Right. So go to our website, neighborproject.us, and there's a banner where you can click on and register for that. There'll be a silent auction. There'll be an opportunity to donate, all that stuff. But it's going to be a great night of vision casting.
September 19th.
September 19th at 7:30, I believe, is the time. And it's free to register, and you can see a lot about what we've been up to and where we're going.
Awesome.
And so that's a great opportunity to connect. Because there's always so much going on. We're promoting these state programs. We're promoting and partnering with the city on their programs. We've got this initiative with the sheriff to be targeting certain folks. This partnership with the city to target anybody who could use some assistance with getting connected to banking or building their credit or savings. I mean, in a lot of ways, who couldn't stand to see their savings increase or their credit improved or whatever. So these
positive.
are targeted for a lot of folks, and a lot of these things are available now. We still do have a handful of hands-on volunteer opportunities too, and we've got a great volunteer and donor relations coordinator, Cheryl. So
shout out to Cheryl.
You know Cheryl Curtis, and she's been
Cheryl,
keeping
Sarah,
people active.
Everybody, the whole squad, everybody.
Right. We have an amazing, great team.
Yep.
And
Joseph.
they're always looking at how do we involve other people, and so sometimes that's hands-on volunteering, sometimes that's we have opportunities for people to get into mentoring relationships with people on the pathway to homeownership. Right. There's all sorts of ways for people to get involved.
So the time is now 8:57. We like to end the show on a positive note. Christine, take us there.
Wow, we've learned so much. I mean, I think just kind of being a neighbor and being a leader for our community. We were talking earlier about some of the people in the community that have represented and sponsored Aurora, but they really didn't start that way. They were just champions for the community, for a greater effort, for building a better community, and that's where they're at today. So everybody just keep on keeping on.
Yep. What do the people of Aurora need to take with them in a positive fashion for today? Something actionable, something to keep in their mind.
Well, so what I always like to sort of think about is just like it. When you look at a macro level, there are big issues that still need to be tackled, but there's always something you can do, right? So I think if we can kind of just sort of sit in a moment, particularly now with so many people struggling, in a moment of empathy, try to put yourself in other people's shoes. And really just sort of think, okay, what if I wasn't in this situation of being as blessed as I am? Or I'm struggling with something, but what are all the blessings that I have, and how can I share those blessings with others? What is a small way that I can contribute? Because ultimately, like, I look back at how we started our first housing project that we called Bryan House, and then we started Emmanuel House, and I think, like, man, that was like, we didn't know what we were doing. But thank goodness for that experience, because it laid the groundwork for what the Neighbor Project has become. And so, if my wife and I hadn't just said, like, you know what, we don't necessarily know how to start a housing organization, or so, if we had just sort of like wrestled with that for a while and thought, oh, this is too big, we just started with one. We raised money to buy one small apartment building. We didn't know what we were doing, and then, it just sort of, we partnered with other people. We reached out for help. We said, how can we fill in gaps? And it turned into something that is bigger. And so don't think about where you're going. Just think about how can you help one person today.
Yep.
And how can you play a role in helping unlock or untap the potential in somebody else.
That's very nice. You know what? I appreciate that. I'm going to plant this flag for the audience before we go. I was blessed to be able to go to the Chicago CLI conference.
Community
last year.
Leadership Initiative.
I really appreciate that. And there I met with a bunch of teams. It was a great fashion in which we did things. And I was told by some good people there that I should join AmeriCorps, which I did. And it changed my life. And through that, I became FEMA certified in managing and developing volunteers. Took an independent study course, and it changed my life. So I appreciate the opportunity to go there, with which to sharpen my knife with another like-minded individual, and to help me continue trying to help
others.
That's it. Paying it forward, paying it forward, paying it forward. The time is now 9:00 a.m. Ooh, right on time. Thank you, JP. You've been listening to Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast, and we're thankful that we have a friend of the show who came over today, Mr. Rick Guzman of the Neighbor Project. Please check us out on YouTube. Hit the like button and the subscribe button. We hope that you guys have a blessed, positive, and powerful day. Pay it forward, stay motivated, and happy, and be the neighbor. And with that, we out. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you, guys.